Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Sober Psychology. I'm your host, Michael. Today, we're going to be diving into an often misunderstood aspect of human nature, which is the need for validation. That's right. You all have it, and I don't care what you say. You all have it. I have it. You have it. Get over it. But the reality is that we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard, and we all want to be appreciated. It's completely natural. But at what point does that need for validation turn into a psychological crutch? So today we're going to explore why we seek approval, how it can shape our behaviors, and most importantly, how we can cultivate self-validation and inner confidence. We're not sitting around a circle singing Kumbaya, as you know. We're just going to hit you in the teeth with it. We're going to talk about it from the perspective of just everybody, average human. We're going to talk about it from the perspective of addicts, alcoholics. We're going to talk about it from my perspective as a Christian, and we're just going to dive in. And as always, you guys have been great with communicating through comments and stuff. If you don't agree with something, let's talk about it. If you want to reach out, you know how to find me, so we can do it that way. But this is definitely something that I can, without a shadow of a doubt, say that everybody struggles with. So let's break free from the constant need of likes, compliments, and reassurances. Let's just dive right in and let's start talking about it, eh? So the roots of seeking validation, that's going to come from infancy. Humans rely on caregivers for survival. Right off the rip, at the very beginning of us being created and birthed into this world, we cry, caregiver responds, and this foundational exchange conditions us to seek external feedback. So from the very beginning, before you could formulate multiple thoughts or too much complexity in the way that you think, we're already beginning to seek this validation. And then you move on to childhood, which is where you're looking for approval from parents. You're looking for approval from teachers, from coaches, from peers. And this is going to start to help and shape our identity through that process. But what happens when the approval becomes our primary source of self-worth? This is a very difficult transition, and we see this a lot. You've seen it in movies. If you don't have kids of your own, just a steady observation of a younger grouping of human beings, you can start to see that from a very young age, we're looking to every parent, every adult, everybody who's in our life that is some level of authority figure. We're looking for their validation, right? And that's natural, right? We need that constant feedback to help us begin to mold and shape and whatnot. But then also you introduce friends and you introduce people that are your own age and have your own interests and whatever the case may be. But you're beginning to shape your personality through that. But it's very difficult because, as kids, everybody's on a pedestal. Everybody's, I don't want to say perfect in your eyes, not necessarily, but you need everybody in your life for something in some level of regard, right? You're not an adult. You don't have a job. You're not, out in survival mode necessarily. So the hard part for, I think, kids, adolescents, whatnot, is when this necessary validation becomes a reflection of our self-worth, right? And then you add in social conditioning, which is where we're rewarded for compliance and conformity, good grades, gold stars, social acceptance. But does this create a dependency on external affirmation? And then you have evolutionary psychology, which says that our ancestors developed on a group acceptance basis for survival, right? And then rejection could mean isolation. It could, which back then, isolation from the group is death, pretty much. You're going to live a very difficult life unless you get lucky and some other group's going to pick you up. We've talked about this in previous episodes where a lot of our survival mechanisms are ingrained in us because we have all been tribal. Our ancestors have all been tribal. in that regard. And if you're not accepted by the tribe, then you're going to be cast out by the tribe, and you don't want to do that. Like, even today we see that the survival mechanism still exists in cliques. High school especially is very cliquish, but then you move on into like an office environment, right? And you still have cliques within the office environment. And then with the introduction to, the internet and how there are groups that are collected on that, like I know people, who seemingly get along with everybody and whatnot, but they have such strong social groups, like on a Discord channel, or people that they keep up with through playing games. I'm this way too, right? Like I have a group of friends that I only know through playing video games with, and it's a close group of people. But even within that, there's this constant need for validation. I want to be the best. I want to show you that I'm good because I don't want you to kick me out of the group, right? And I think that this is exacerbated ridiculously in today's day and age, because with social media, there's that element of anonymity, right? Or there's lack of accountability, right? I could say something and do something in regards to casting someone out or mistreating them, and they're not in front of me. They're not going to come knock on my front door. Well, some of them might, because there's some creepers out there for sure. But there's this constant need for this tribal connection, if you will, this grouping, right? And so you're seeking validation from the people within that group. You want to be good at something. You want to have some level of what they see, what the group sees as worth or value, in order to keep you into the group. And that's very dangerous. It can get very dangerous, right? So that's part of I guess a segue into this modern day dilemma that we have. We go from being tribal, and we have this desire, this need for social acceptance. We need to be in the group, because if we're not in the group, then we're kicked out of the group and we're loners now. We're by ourselves. But then you fast forward to 2025, and we've got this digital age, which has completely amplified our need for validation. And we don't just seek approval from close friends and family anymore. We crave it from strangers online. How many likes did that post get? Did they respond to my message? Why didn't they comment on my picture? The dopamine hits from notifications create an addiction cycle, reinforcing external validation as a source of happiness. So I'm going to say it again to you, but these dopamine hits that you get from these notifications create an addiction cycle, right? And it's reinforcing the external validation as a source of happiness. We have, as human beings, confused our minds. We've tricked our minds. And we talked about this, I think, in the last episode, maybe 2 episodes ago, where we're in this constant, especially with the world at our fingertips on these phones and whatnot, we are constantly seeking this dopamine, right? And you get to this low point, you find this dopamine, and it's let me doom scroll, or let me post this picture so I can get likes. Not post this picture because I felt good about posting the picture just because I wanted to share it with close friends and family. No, we've got people that will have 1,300 friends on Facebook. You don't know 1,300 people, you twat. Stop acting like they're important. But it blows my mind, right? Because we'll do this. I've done this. I've fallen into this trap, right? I remember, I'm so old that I was kind of at the beginning of Instagram becoming a thing. And I remember for a while there, I was gaining a lot of success and I'd say success, in today's terms, it's not that big of a deal, but I would post a picture and get 70 plus likes. I'd get comments. And here's the thing is I didn't, at the beginning, before it was put out there to this whole algorithm and whatnot, at the beginning, it was just close friends. I say close, people that I knew at least. And then it evolves into this hashtag thing. You got to do the hashtag to be able to let people find you. And then it's random people liking and hating and all this kind of, it's why do I care? I don't care at all, right? But it's this illusion of perfection on social media that leads to comparison, anxiety, and self-doubt. And we measure our worth through these digital metrics constantly. I see so many friends, even family, that just get so trapped in this mindset of if I post a picture of my child and it doesn't get X amount of likes or comments, then all of a sudden I'm a failure. That's your child. Were you posting it for the likes, or were you posting it to brag about your kid? Think about it. It's just kind of ridiculous how, and it takes off. It takes off so quickly too. I think that's the thing that scares me, is that, like, you know, I was born in the late 80s and grew up in the 90s. And so the internet really kind of just came in a flurry, and it hasn't stopped, right? And I'm 35 now, so I've done everything I can just to hang on. But this constant need for validation from strangers is something that's baffling. And I've had to check myself on this a lot, because what do I care if Joe Blow 69 wants to comment on my stuff in a negative way? Why is that hurting my feelings? Or if I'm constantly going back and checking a picture to see who liked it, who looked at it, whatever, like it's a real sickness, right? But again, that's that dopamine rush that we get, right? That's the notifications. Like, I've gotten to the point now where I turn my notifications off. Other than what I do for this podcast, I have my notifications turned off, because I get so sick of posting something and then I'll look, and it's not anybody else's fault, it's mine, but I'm constantly like looking. Somebody did this, somebody did that. And I realize that it's a dopamine rush for me. That's a pretty sick place, but I'm getting that dopamine because I feel like I'm validated. If I post something and it gets likes, I'm now validated. So it's a very sickening cycle. And again, if you go and look at the neurological side of it, it is something that creates an addiction cycle in your brain. The same thing as addicts, alcoholics, when they're struggling with the substance abuse and they're seeking that substance in order to be able to escape. That in and of itself is the same. It triggers the same portion of the brain as if you're posting a picture and constantly looking for the notifications, right? So it's very dangerous, and it's a very slippery slope how quickly it happens. So I don't know. I mean, I think my takeaway from that is, if you're someone who has 1,300 plus friends on Facebook, you need to grow up. I can tell you, like, I think I've whittled mine down to like 300, and that's still too much. But I've done this a lot in my life, where, like, I will have friends, and then over the years, it'd be a decade gone by, and I haven't talked to that person at all. I don't need to keep up with them. I don't need to have them seeing my stuff anymore. I don't need some random person just because they sent me a friend request. I don't care if we have 3 mutual friends. That doesn't mean I know you. So that's just something to pay attention to. Again, a lot of this is personal preference. For me, how I run my life doesn't mean you have to run yours that way, but you can look at the science of how it creates an addiction cycle when you're seeking that dopamine from all of this external validation. But backtracking a little bit, looking at us as kids, we do something and we're looking to our teachers to be able to let us know if we did right or wrong, right? Because we don't always have the greatest amount of understanding of a situation. We don't have the greatest level of discernment. So a teacher giving us that response, hey, you did a great job. But then that's where that social conditioning kind of comes in. Like, hey, you got a good grade, you get a gold star, boom. As opposed to when fast forward or later on when we're adults, and it's like, I did well on that job. I don't need a high five, or I guess we get raises, things like that. Anyways, you can see that shift of that validation that you're looking for. It becomes an external source of your self-worth, right? And that's a dangerous spot to be in. So what are some signs that you may be overly dependent on external validation? If you constantly are seeking approval before making decisions, that's a problem. If you're feeling anxious when your efforts go unnoticed, if you're changing your opinions to fit in with others, boy, oh boy, do I know some people that do this. If you're avoiding activities or choices that may invite criticism. And then if you're feeling unworthy unless praised or affirmed by others. I want to go through and break some of those down. If you're constantly seeking approval before making decisions, your heart's not in the right place with what you're doing, right? If you're doing something because you feel like it's the right thing to do, or it's something that you want to do, that's where you need to be. But if you're doing it and you realize, I could do it this way and get so many more people to like what I'm doing, that's seeking validation before you even made a decision for yourself. And that right there, you become an empty shell, right? You're just becoming what everybody wants you to be. We've talked about this in previous episodes, that mask that we put on. It gets very exhausting to be all things to all people. If you're feeling anxious when your efforts go unnoticed, why did you do it? What was your motivation behind it? What was your motive? Why in the world did you do what you did? Was it to get the attention from everybody else? Was it for the pat on the back? Again, I don't think you're doing it for the right reasons if that's the case. And then all of these too, if you really break them down, can ultimately develop into some level of resentment. We're going to talk about that in a second. But changing your opinions to fit in with others, you people-pleasing a-holes. And I've done this too. I could say this with confidence. I could call you all a-holes with confidence because I'd call myself that. But there's so much of today, especially you see like with politics and with religion and whatnot, there's so many people that will say one thing and then as soon as they're in a different crowd, they say something else. And you don't know who to trust. And you can't be trusted if you're that way because you can't even trust yourself, right? You don't trust your gut. You don't have any level of intuition that you're gonna just dig your heels in and say, okay, this is what I feel is right. You're a chameleon. And I think we talked about this 2 episodes ago, but I struggled a lot with this too. As stubborn and stern and confident as I try and be, there are so many times where I will just blend in with a crowd, or used to blend in with a crowd. Now I'm just the asshole that nobody wants to be around because I'm just not going to budge for you, which is a great feeling, by the way. And that's not sarcasm, that's freedom. But the people pleasing aspect, we talked about this. I did a TikTok video about this too, and it did really well, where I was saying that, a lot of these people that are people pleasers, they don't have any confidence in themselves, and they don't have confidence in who they are. And a lot of this seeking validation, the external validation that we receive to be able to determine our self-worth, it's lack of confidence in who we are, right? You don't know you're not convicted in your beliefs. You don't have confidence in who you are. That's a hard thing to do, by the way. But if you're one of these people that's constantly changing your opinions to fit in with others, at some level, you're going to get resentful because you feel like you're being run over again and again and again. And that's a very difficult spot to be in because you don't feel like you have identity. This is wearing that mask, right? And I think a lot of humans, as opposed to what, Michael? But I think a lot of humans have a hard time with this because we feel like being agreeable and not having any level of resistance is somehow or another a sign of high morality. And I'm here to tell you that's just not the case. Genuinely, I don't believe that's the case. I think that if you're one of those people that avoids conflict and just becomes what everybody wants you to be, you're the pushover, you end up getting more bitter and resentful and spiteful than anybody else because you internalize all of this. And it's a very negative way. It's a very, very difficult road to get to that point, right? But this seeking validation, you care so much about what other people think about you that you are willing to not voice your opinion. You're willing to not have a belief system. You're willing to be whatever everybody wants you to be just because you don't want people to not like you. And that's pretty sad because if you think about it, if you're the kind of person that just says yes to everything, and if you're the kind of person that just agrees with everybody, you are typically liked a lot less and respected a lot less than the person who is stubborn in their belief system. People like individuality and they like uniqueness and they like people who stand for something. And maybe you're wrong. Maybe what you're standing for is wrong. And that's where we have accountability. That's where you have good people in your lives who are willing to tell you the truth. But if you're the pushover that is just constantly changing for everybody else, you're going to eventually develop this strong level of resentment. And that's a dangerous and scary spot to be in, folks, I promise you. Another sign that you're overly dependent on external validation was avoiding activities or choices that may invite criticism. We are so freaking scared of people criticizing us. And when you get to the point where you're happy, healthy, and confident, you see criticism as a feedback system. You see criticism as a way to grow. It was one of the biggest shifts for me as a human being. I hate being criticized. I hate being wrong. I'm a perfectionist. Talked about this before. I I have a low level of OCD. I have this outrageous desire to be Mr. Perfect, right? And so when someone criticizes something that I do, it's not that I'm mad at them for criticizing me. I will beat myself up because I wasn't perfect. And it's such an impossible standard to meet. But if you're at this point where you're avoiding activities or choices that may invite criticism, you're not willing to grow in the right ways, right? If you're confident going into that situation and saying, okay, I mean, I'm like 90% certain that I'll get this right, but there's a 10% chance that I fail. Okay, cool. Go into it anyways. And then when that criticism hits you, when you do something wrong, or when inevitably somebody has something bad to say, take that as a feedback. They said this a while back too. Like, one of the best rules, one of the best skills that I've developed was understanding that if it doesn't apply, let it fly. People can say whatever they want about me. I know the truth. The truth is an absolute defense. And if someone comes up to me and says, you're stupid because your foot is purple, I know for a fact that my foot isn't purple. So why would I let what they said bother me? Right? So that's the thing with criticism. If I'm going into it, I know, okay, I'm confident in who I am. I'm confident in how I prepared. I'm confident in what I'm doing, and I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I'm doing it because I feel like this is me helping or doing, my best. And then someone criticizes you for it. Okay, let that be a feedback. And if it stings a little bit, if it bothers you that somebody said that, there's a chance that you need to look at something, right? But if it doesn't apply, let it go. What does it matter? Just say thank you and move on. We said this before too. That was one of the best exercises for me to break my ego down in rehab. Was we had to sit around in accountability every morning, and you had to do what's called pull-ups. You had to be observant of everyone else in the group, and you had to find something that they were doing that was wrong, whether they were being selfish, self-centered, whatever it was. And in accountability, well, in that moment, you're supposed to go pull them up, and you're going to say, hey, when you're this way, and then you give them the character defects. You're not doing it because you hate them. You're not doing it because you're trying to start a fight. You're telling them, hey, when you flip off the old lady across the street, it is selfish, self-centered, whatever the character flaws for that may be. And all they can say is thank you. That's it. That's all you can say in accountability. Thank you. And if you argue and if you rebuttal, you're wrong. And I argued, I did it, and I got yelled at by my sponsor because it's just like, if someone's telling me something, they're trying to help me out by giving me that criticism. My response is just thank you. And if what they said holds no weight because I didn't do what they said, okay, then it's still just thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. But if it does bother me a little bit, chances are I need to take a look at something. That's how most people, everybody needs to be looking at criticism, right? Instead of avoiding activities because you know that you're going to get some level of criticism. Just go into it. Take the criticism as a form of growth. Then we have the feeling unworthy unless praised or affirmed by others. Again, I've been there. That's just, you're seeking your identity and your validation from other people who don't know you. Nobody has ever walked a day in your shoes. Nobody knows fully who you are other than you and God. And you don't even know who you fully are, by the way. So let's just say it's God. But this feeling of unworthy, unless you're praised by or affirmed by others, it's just lacking that identity, right? We're just finding our identity in all of these external things that just are vapors in the wind, right? So how do we break the cycle? How do we begin to cultivate this self-validation? Number one, you can develop self-awareness. Pay attention to moments when you seek external approval. Ask yourself, why do I need validation in this situation? Number two, reframe negative self-talk. Instead of saying, I need them to tell me that I did well, try, I believe that I did my best and that's enough. Number three, set internal standards. Define your values and measure success based on your own criteria, not society's. Number four, practice self-compassion. Treat yourself with kindness. Your worth isn't dependent on external praise. Your worth is not dependent on external praise. Number five, limit social media exposure. Be mindful of your digital habits, take breaks and focus on real world connections. And then number 6, 7, wherever we're at, I don't care. 6, engage in self-validating activities. Do things for personal fulfillment rather than external rewards. Journaling, meditation, creative hobbies. This is the mindfulness stuff that we talked about. So again, going to break that down real quick, develop the self-awareness. Just pay attention when you are in a situation where you feel like you need someone's validation, someone's approval. Ask yourself why. Why do I need validation in this situation? There's some level of insecurity, some level of fear, whatever the case may be. But ask yourself why. And again, we've talked about this a million times, but this takes that thought from being in the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, and now you can start to work through it and develop, right? Reframe the negative self-talk. Stop beating yourself up. Would you talk to your best friend the way that you talk to yourself? Treat yourself better, okay? Set internal standards. This is a big one too. Define your values and measure success based on your own criteria, not society's. This is a hard one for me, as being 35, just had my first kid. I'm 5 years coming up on 5. Well, I'm 4 years sober. We're beginning year 5, but from society's point of view, I'm way behind. I'm still in school. I'm trying to finish my degree. I'm trying to get into the career that I want to get into. Where most of my friends who didn't burn their lives down, they're already doctors. They have their careers. They have their families. They have their 2.5 kids in the white picket fence. And that's fine. But I've fought forever to get to this point of realizing where I'm at right now is absolutely perfect. Okay. Could it be better? Sure. Could it be worse? Absolutely. I've been at worse. I know, and I know exactly what that's like. But getting to this point of understanding that my internal standards cannot be what society's are. They got to be mine, right? Practice self-compassion. Again, treat yourself with kindness. Stop beating yourself up. All right. Limit social media exposure. This is a hard one. I've been falling into the trap lately, just with being at home with my son so much, and a lot of nap time is just him in my arms, and I have one hand free, so I'm just doom scrolling. But you gotta be mindful of the digital habits that you start to create, because it will mess with your mind. It does mess with your mind. It's very bad. And engage in the self-validating activities. Do things for personal fulfillment rather than external rewards. Okay. Do what you want to do, guys. We're only here for 80, 90 years. We're here for 80 to 90 years. That's if we're lucky. How much of your time are you going to spend letting other people determine your choices for you? Do you know where those people are going to be in 10, 20 years? Why let them ruin your life now? And it's not their fault. You're doing it. Stop letting other people dictate your life, right? Stop letting the lack of personal fulfillment be something that's constantly invading your life. And I'm not saying go be hedonistic and go do whatever you want to do. I'm saying find what you love, figure out if it's helpful, harmful, whatever the case may be, and then just do it. Make it work, okay? But don't not do something because you're worried about what somebody else is going to think, okay? And this, again, this is a practice that goes into that journaling and that meditation and the creative hobbies. Like, start to find who you are, start to discover who you are, right? I mean, for me, this is a big one too, because like my foundation is built on who God created me to be. Do I know who that is? No, not fully. Am I discovering who it is? Yes. And that is an uphill battle for me. It's a constant journey, and I'm grateful to be on it. But we have to keep finding out who we are. But am I going to find out who I am through what sport team I like? Am I going to find out who I am through the success I have at work or school? Am I going to? No, all of those things are just vapors in the wind, right? I need to find myself rooted in something that is eternal, okay? And for me, that's God, right? And so segue right into that. Galatians, oh no, guys, I lost my place. Oh yeah, Galatians 5:26. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another, right? Be you. And then I think I have it in Psalms. Where were Psalms? Guys, I'm sorry. I should have written all this down. Psalms 37. That was it. All right. So Psalms 37. I'm just going to read 3-6 real quick. And you can argue with me that this is taken out of context. But I mean, again, the Bible is an interpretation thing, right? So like for me, when I read this every now and then, I'm always getting like this hit in the face with like, why are you constantly worrying about what others think about you? Why are you finding your value in other things? Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. Okay, this is God. God is not into the business of not fulfilling promises. Okay, and if we're constantly seeking him, we've talked about this in a previous episode too. That used to be written all over rehab. Is seek. That's it. One word, seek. Just constantly seek. Sometimes I don't know what we're doing. There are weeks, months even, that I will wake up and I'll be like, why am I even talking to God? Why am I even, in my mind, it's like, why am I wasting my time? Whatever the case may be, but I just keep seeking. And it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's just constantly, it's an open conversation, right? But I find that through praying, through reading scripture, through constantly seeking, I start to find a little bit more about myself through that, right? And that's God allowing me to see what he wants me to see, okay? And I can't find it in the success that I have in school or my job or whatever. I need to find it in who God created me to be. And I will spend the rest of my life finding that out. I don't think I'm ever going to get to a point where I get 100% of the answer until I'm dead. Well, physically on this earth dead, but this is where it's important to find your center point in all of this. And then we have Romans 12:3, right? For by grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned, right? Like there has to be this faith in something greater than what's here on this earth, right? There has to be faith in the Creator. And maybe for you, that's not God. I mean, we've talked about higher power on here. We've talked about, all of these episodes that we do gets to a point of helping you understand that you cannot put your faith in man, right? All right. That was kind of a segue, but for the sobriety and validation, this is a big one. This one's really tough. And I personally, again, being a baby, being newly sober, this is something that I've been struggling with a lot, but many in recovery from addiction and alcoholism struggle with validation seeking behaviors, right? And sobriety can bring an identity crisis for sure. Who I am without external validation through substance or social approval, I have no clue. Like at the beginning, I have no clue. You build this whole life around drinking. And why do we drink? Half of us, it's to fit in. Half of us, it's because we hate ourselves. Well, all of us. But for me, I've always been pretty decent at communicating with people, but I never believed in myself and I didn't like myself. And so what do I do to make that situation better? I'll just drink and I'll fit in with everybody. And then I start gaining friends who drink with me. And what do I do when that's all stripped away? That was a really difficult thing for me to understand, is that if I'm an alcoholic, you mean I could never drink again? I can't drink like normal people ever again? And that was awful because that was my key to fitting in. That was the only way I could be liked, right? Which is delusional, by the way. I laugh because it's ludicrous to think that way. But this is a hard thing for addicts and alcoholics in recovery, is because we don't feel comfortable in our own skin. It's a very difficult thing to get to, right? But finding strength in internal growth rather than external affirmation is crucial. And I think that's what really propelled me. And especially when I moved away from the safety net, the little bubble that I was in around the rehab, is I had such a beautiful community there. And that community where the rehab was that I went to, it's still to this day, I treasure that because that's family to me. But when I got out of that, and I was kind of on my own out here in the desert, learning how to work, learning how to live, learning how to get along with other people who aren't that healthy, and being alone. It was very tough. But I became, I don't want to say obsessed, but maybe I did become obsessed with this pattern of internal growth. I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to continue seeking God. I wanted to continue growing as a human being because I felt like where I was at, I wasn't even close to my potential. I hadn't even hit 50%. That's why I keep telling people, like, I'm on the bonus life now, and I'm so grateful for that. But I'm just on this pattern of internal growth as opposed to external validation. And again, support groups, therapy, things like that can help individuals develop intrinsic self-worth rather than relying on others. That's a big one too. So final thoughts. Seeking validation isn't inherently bad. It's normal. It's a normal part of human interaction. But when it becomes the foundation of self-worth, it's time to reassess. True confidence comes from within. It's built through self-acceptance, resilience, and personality or personal integrity. Challenge yourself. I would say challenge yourself this week to validate yourself before seeking it from other people. Validate yourself. Be confident in who you are. Know that what you're doing is what you're doing for you, for what you believe to be the right reasons. Don't go straight to this point of like, I wonder what so-and-so will think about this. Just do it. Just do it. Believe in yourself. And I know that sounds cliche, but that's it right there. So anyways, if this episode helped in any way, if it resonated with you, share it, leave a review, like it, whatever the case may be. But I would like to keep growing, like to keep boosting this community and seeing where it can take us. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, stay grounded, stay authentic, keep your head up, keep your heart open, go help somebody. Love you guys.